By the end of this video, you'll see why boundary guilt shows up so quickly for highly sensitive people, and what begins to change when you no longer feel responsible for others. In this video, you'll discover why boundary guilt shows up so quickly for highly sensitive people, especially under stress. What your mind does in that moment that creates guilt almost instantly, and what begins to change when you stop taking on responsibility that isn't yours. If you're a highly sensitive person, boundary guilt can show up very quickly. You say no, or you set a limit, or you don't respond the way someone expected, and almost immediately, something inside you can start to tighten. There can be a sense that something isn't right, and this can happen even when nothing dramatic has actually happened. And this can be confusing because on the surface, what you did actually makes a lot of sense. You needed some space, you didn't have the capacity, or you were just being honest. And in spite of that honesty, you can still end up feeling like something isn't settled inside. Part of what is happening here has to do with how your system works as a highly sensitive person. You process things deeply. You notice subtle shifts, and you feel things more strongly. This is inherent in being a highly sensitive person, and they've researched this quite extensively. This trait is sometimes described through the DOES, the initials DOES, which stands for depth of processing, overstimulation, emotional responsiveness, and sensitivity to subtle stimuli. This is what researchers have seen is consistently the nature of people who carry the HSP trait. And so as a result, when someone reacts, even slightly, maybe just a pause or a shift in tone or a bit of distance, you don't just register it, you feel it. And when you're already under stress, this can become even more pronounced. So it's like our radar are already picking up all of the subtle things. We're clued in to how people react to everything that we do. And we're constantly used to adjusting to how people react to minimize any kind of disturbance in the relationship. So what happens is, especially when you're under stress, then you'll feel this even more, and there's even less space and even less capacity to hold what's happening. And so instead of simply noticing that they're having a reaction, your mind moves quickly into, I'm causing this, or I need to fix this, or I shouldn't have done that. And it can feel immediate, almost automatic. And it helps to see this clearly. This isn't just the HSP trait itself here. HSP means that you're sensitive. You pick up nuance. You notice their reaction. That's the part that is the HSP trait. But in addition to that, what can happen is that when a sensitive nervous system is under pressure, it tries to cope with what it's picking up. And so this is where the stress response, or a coping mechanism, which you may have developed a long time ago, kicks in, which is not just sensitivity, noticing their reaction. It's trying to do something here. And what it's doing is trying to take responsibility. This is a coping mechanism that we as HSPs tend to rely on. And we do it because it creates a sense of order. Like if I'm the cause, then I can fix it. And if I can fix it, then things can settle again. So in the moment, it can even feel helpful, even though it actually is creating tension in that moment, and tension can even grow as that continues. But what happens is that in that moment, something subtle shifts. Basically, you move out of your own lane and into the other person's lane, into their feelings, their reaction, their experience. And this starts to feel like something you need to manage. And this shift happens very quickly, so quickly that it often goes unnoticed. It just seems natural. Like it just, of course, that's my responsibility. Like the logic happens so quickly that you're not even aware that it's happening. You're involved with it, and it's happening internally, automatically. This is the nature of reaction. If you hit that little part on your knee and then your knee kicks, like that's reaction. It doesn't even have to go to the brain. It just instantly reacts. So when we're believing something, when we're in a stress kind of reaction, then this can happen so quickly that we're not aware at all. And we start adjusting, we start smoothing things out, we start trying to bring things back to a place that feels okay. And this is where the guilt starts to take shape. Because now it's no longer just I set a boundary, it becomes something like I've created a problem. And that's even when all you did was respond honestly. So notice what your mind is doing. It links their reaction to your responsibility, as if their internal experience now belongs to you. Very subtle. This is how we get into the other person's lane. And once that link is in place, then guilt follows naturally. Because if you're responsible, it makes sense that you should feel bad. Like if I did that, if that's really the case, then why would I want to hurt somebody? Why would I want to do something to make them feel bad? And so this is how guilt immediately comes in, because we're believing that we are responsible. And so it makes sense when you're feeling responsible to question yourself. It makes sense to want to undo what you said. And this is why boundary guilt can feel so convincing. It feels justified. But as you look more closely, something becomes clearer. You can be aware of someone's experience without taking ownership of it. You can care that they're disappointed without needing to remove that disappointment. That distinction is subtle, but it changes everything. Because when awareness and responsibility get blended together, your system carries more than it needs to. And that's what creates the weight. Imagine this. Someone close to you asks for something, maybe your time or your energy, your attention. And as you listen, you can feel it. Oh, it's not a yes. There's a sense that this would stretch you too thin. So you say, I'm not going to be available for that. And there's a pause. And then maybe their expression shifts slightly. Maybe their tone changes. And you notice it because you're an HSP. And almost immediately, something starts moving inside, a pull. Maybe I should just do it. Maybe I came across too strongly. Maybe I'm being difficult. Your attention starts to turn away from what you felt true for you and toward how they're experiencing the moment. You're scanning. Are they okay? Did I upset them? Should I adjust? And you can feel the urge to go back on what you said, to soften it, to explain it, to make sure everything is okay again. This is also where you have the option to look at it differently. You don't have to push the urge away. You don't have to force yourself to hold the boundary. You can start just by noticing what's happening inside of you. There's a part of you that steps in and says, this is mine to fix. And as long as this feels true, letting go of that responsibility can feel uncomfortable, even wrong. This is where a practice like the work of Byron Katie can be so helpful. You can gently look at what you're believing in that moment. For example, I'm responsible for how they feel. You can pause with that and ask yourself, is it true? and what happens inside of you when you believe that it is true. You can feel the pressure of it, the need to adjust, the need to manage, the need to make things right. And as that belief begins to loosen, even slightly, something opens. There's more space. You can still care, you can still be present, but you're no longer carrying something that doesn't belong to you. And from there, boundaries start to feel different. Less like something you have to hold together, and more like a natural expression of what's true for you in that moment. In this video, we looked at why boundary guilt shows up so quickly for highly sensitive people, especially under stress. And that is because as highly sensitive people, we notice people's reactions and we care about them. And when we're stressed, we're even more likely to go into reaction as a result. We looked at what your mind does in that moment that creates guilt almost instantly, and that is we take responsibility for their emotions. As soon as we do that, then we think we did something bad, and then we feel guilty. And finally, we looked at what begins to change when you stop taking on responsibility that isn't yours, and you start to feel a kind of freedom inside to take care of your needs while still feeling connected to the other person. So the feeling I'm left with today is that if we think it's our job to make sure the other person is happy with our boundary, it becomes impossible to hold the boundary we need to hold.